Hello, and welcome to MyCounselor.Online. I'm your host, Brittany East, and joining me today as our featured counselor is Mary Faxon. Before we jump into Mary's article, Mary, can you take a second to introduce yourself for those viewers who may not know you yet?
Sure thing. Well, I am, first of all, in Tennessee. Welcome. Welcome to the South. A lot of people get to travel all over the place. So we are about 45 miles south of Nashville. So welcome. That's part of me. I've been here most of my days, and where I got my start in the helping profession in social work, and loved it, but wanted to do a little bit more deep work with families and individuals to help them get out of patterns that they've stayed stuck in. So that's kind of what led me to pursue private practice counseling itself.
Okay.
So that's kind of what landed me here after about 10 years of social work. Got another degree in clinical mental health counseling, and did that alongside of ministry with my church plant, my home church plant, of about 22 years. So that's why it felt like a pretty good blend for me to be landed here.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a long time of experience to bring into your work. So I'm sure your clients benefit so much from that. So I love that. So your article today, though, is titled "Dealing with Loneliness in Relationships with Mental Health Differences." I know it's a mouthful, but it's like, you're letting people know this is what we're getting into. We're not straight.
Here's where we're going. Don't be scared.
Yeah, exactly. So what inspired you to write this article?
Yeah, I think the short answer would be because this is what I keep seeing. We do a lot of work with the individuals who are ready to dive in and do their work to tackle the obstacles of their own mental health journey. But there's this kind of gap that I keep running into for language around what about the spouses? What about the parents of adult children who are walking through this, or even siblings? Many people who have walked through experiences themselves and are trying to tackle and go, okay, what's my issue? Let me work through my stuff. There's this whole other world for those who are walking alongside them and are kind of grappling with what this is like. And the other piece I see is there's in this blending of faith, I've noticed a lot of, we'll call it trends in maybe social media. We've been working in it in counseling processes for a long time, but I think it's becoming more in the public eye of mental health in the church, and just not a lot of dialogue around it. So I wanted to kind of just provide some groundwork and framework for people who are walking alongside a loved one, particularly in a faith context as well, and kind of address some of those things and provide them a jumping off place.
No, I really appreciate that. And it's true, because I feel like a lot of, you're thinking like, oh, if someone's going to counseling is because they have the problem. Or like, they're struggling with something that's diagnosable versus someone, that's like, kind of like what you said, because that was my next question even too, like, is your article is like, what kind of relationship is it applying to? And it seems like you're like parent, child, spouse, sibling, like all these relationships. If you're close with someone, you're going to be affected by whatever they're going through. So it's true, you're kind of hitting the gap that no one seems to be maybe as verbal about. So I know in your article, you said it tends to be people who are struggling with long-term mental illnesses. So what do you consider like a long-term mental illness that may affect a relationship so intensely?
Yeah, and the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is always being kind of in revision and learning about how we can heal problems and learning about growth processes. So I want to be mindful that sometimes we can get a handle of a name and go, this is the thing. Oh my gosh, this is forever and always, and it's terrible. I'm not saying that, but on a continuum of experiences, some pretty common, deeply impactful experiences in mental health differences would be something like bipolar disorder, bipolar 2, even a mood disorder like borderline personality disorder, which they've learned is related to attachment, trauma, even PTSD itself. People have been through war or have been traumatized by abuse So many different interwoven experiences from what people experience in their life. But things that the DSM or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, if I can say that, I don't say enough. Obviously, I talking with real people, so there you go. We don't talk like that in therapy, by the way. People.
Right.
That would call it something that's pervasive, that it filters into all areas of your life, how you relate emotionally, how you can show up at work, how you can keep yourself calm when something scary or difficult is happening. You would know that this is something that it's not just like grief related. I just lost my parent, and so my emotions are everywhere and I'm having a hard time concentrating. It's not just in a segment of your life for a period of time. This is something that continues to show up, and it continues to be difficult for you to regulate or relate to other people. And it affects how you do your job, how you get rest, how you take care of yourself. That would be more of what we're talking about in long-term effect.
Yeah, no, that's really clear. So I appreciate that. Just, kind of bringing people to like what this does look like. Because you're right, there are seasons maybe with a spouse or a partner where it can be tough versus like, okay, like we kind of have to adjust our whole life to accommodate like what's going on. Something you talked about too is like the idea that like daily experiences can add up. Does that like, I know it's kind of an interesting term to think about, like causing trauma in our bodies, not necessarily like even like someone's hurting us, but just like internal trauma. Like how does that happen, or how does that work, these daily experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're living next to that person and they're hopefully doing their work. They're learning about their regulation. They're learning about what's going on. But there's probably a pretty big chunk of time that they haven't learned about what's going on, that they're just experiencing whatever they're going through, major depression or manic episodes or even suicidal attempts, or big outbursts of anger. Our bodies, our nervous systems, as the one who is not experiencing that, are still experiencing our own fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses. When we sense there's a danger emotionally, mentally, even physically, this person does not feel like the person I feel safe with, or this person I'm not understanding, I don't know what to do. Our own bodies are still experiencing the pressure, the pain, and really it is like a trauma, a secondary trauma, being around that person's responses. And we're like, what do we do? We're kind of going through, sorting through, how do we address it? How do we take care of that? So it does add up in our body. And we can start to exhibit some of those responses, like PTSD responses of we're hypervigilant, or we can't rest, or we're always kind of thinking worst case scenario, and we feel like we can't separate ourselves from what that person is experiencing.
And what do you think are like some consequences then if like someone doesn't take the time to like recognize that like they're kind of going through their own trauma? Like what are some long-term consequences then if they don't like take care of themselves?
Mm-hmm. Well, much like any other kind of response, if we're not able to have rest, it adds up. We're shorter tempered, we're not able to focus. It can affect our eating patterns, our sex drive, how we relate to other people who are not our loved one can be directly affected. How, if we're kind of drawn to respond to them, but also physically. We hear a lot of responses physically and emotionally of illness or chronic fatigue syndrome, for sometimes even parents that have walked with us through children or growing adult children, and their own bodies and emotions are just exhausted, or adrenal fatigue, that kind of experience as well.
No, that makes sense. It's really intense. So what are, like, when someone does have a diagnosis, or you feel like, okay, like we have kind of concrete, not proof, but like ground to start moving forward, like what are some of the new realities then the partner or the parent is going to like have to embrace within this relationship?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A big part of the realities are that this is not going to go away overnight. Noticing their own expectations, and that sometimes even a grief.
Yeah.
Recognize, I didn't expect this. This wasn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
Whether a parent or a spouse or a sibling, and recognizing this is the work that my loved one is actually going to have to keep engaging in all their life. How they regulate themselves, how they give care to their bodies, their emotions, their processes, and recognizing this can change some things, how we spend our time together, how we spend our time with other people, if we choose to make sure that we're recognizing some signals. Maybe we don't get to go out as often as we want, or we have to adjust our plans or prepare more in order to engage in the things we want to engage in together as a family. Or even recognizing some things we can't do anymore in the way that we may be expected to. So it can be a lot to begin to process and recognize this is just not what we expected, whether we said that out loud or if we kind of kept it tucked away in our heart. It can be really difficult to face that and notice. This can really affect us. And financially, that's another piece. Therapy, physical therapy, medication responses. Those are no small task and still essential in making sure that this person is engaging in their own care. So it's a wide variety of impacts in people's life, and that's hard.
Yeah, that is really hard. And something you brought up earlier is like you kind of wanted, even within like the church or just people's relationship with God, you wanted to like bring this up more. So how do you feel like the grief over this, like, okay, this is not what I expected, this is not what I dreamed for my life, like how do you think that can affect someone's relationship with God then?
Yeah, I think it's so many layers for each person, but it's really common in the work that I've met with people to have some pretty big questions about why. If God is God and he says this and he says he can do that, big questions about why didn't he fix this, or why isn't he fixing it quickly, or what do I believe about medication, or what other believe about healing or protection, or you name it. It can be really hard to wrestle with some of those questions. And the other piece of, what does my faith community believe about this? What is my acceptance from them when we're maybe walking with medication or therapy? What do they believe about? And that impacts our relationship with our own faith, to say, what do I believe when I'm wrestling with other people's doubt or misunderstanding or judgment or lack of information too. That can be a pretty big hurdle, and something that's just really important for people to have permission to go, I didn't see this, and I'm struggling to maybe trust God, struggling to understand his purposes right now, and I need to be able to wrestle with that.
Yeah, because it reminds me of the title you talked about. It's like the loneliness of this position, and it sounds like what you're describing is it can feel maybe like isolating if like no one else is like going through, or no one else knows how to react to what I'm going through, and like how to process that. Like when they see that, even within people, they might feel like we're accepted before, or like, before it was easy and now it's murky.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that can maybe even lead to more of that loneliness within that position.
Yeah, some unnamed stigmas, maybe we could even say that.
Yeah. And something that you mentioned in your article is how family counseling can be helpful, but you said family counseling that is trauma informed. I was just wondering if you could maybe explain like why it's important that it's a trauma informed family counseling, maybe versus like a general family counseling.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to be mindful of the trauma informed, because trauma informed is really a kind of a bottom up, is what we would say, instead of like thoughts to sort through and kind of talk through and tell yourself what to do. If we've been living in basically a war zone, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, our body is in this fight, flight, freeze response. And our sympathetic nervous system, that's responsible for getting us up out of danger or fighting off something, is so activated. It is so alive and loud. that we often cannot reach the good knowledge or information that we usually probably could if we weren't so, to use a common word, triggered or activated by that person, by our memories of our experiences that we've tried to respond to this person with. And our nervous system can't actually get to the good kind of systematic thoughts of like, hey, I'm going to calm, I'm going to whatever. So a trauma informed goes like, hey, I recognize you're probably like maxed out right now.
Yeah.
So we're going to help your body feel this presence of safety first. We're going to help you recognize that and cultivate that in your home so you can activate a safety response to get to the good working knowledge you have to make decisions or build conversations or boundaries or give self-care. If I'm just panicked or protected, I can't get to that good working knowledge. So trauma informed helps your body begin to feel safe and stay safe in order that you can take other steps and make decisions for yourself.
Is there like a particular name for that type of counseling, or do they just need to talk with the their ever prospective counselor that's how they want to do it?
Depends on if the counselor is trained in that. Some counselors are more thought-provoking. So something like we have a model here that we use, neuroscience informed Christian counseling.
Right.
It's informed by things like AEDP or EMDR, something like that are experiential, that are working with brain and body responses, even emotionally focused. EFT therapy is also trauma informed. So you can talk with your therapist if you're not here and find somebody to talk with them to say, I want to work with some trauma informed responses here.
Okay, no, that's really helpful just for anyone who's like looking for that. And also something in your article you brought up is like, which I mean, I feel like we all hear this, like, well, you need to take care of yourself, or you need to do some personal care, which obviously is true. But I feel like, I mean, I know people are really close to who do care for someone, and it's just exhausting, and they can feel like it's impossible. Like I can't do personal care. Like that's not within reach. That's ridiculous. Like don't suggest it. Do you have any advice or like what steps someone can take when they feel like they're in the like impossible zone of any type of personal care?
Yeah, I appreciate you putting the name to it too. It's like, I can't do that. I'm in panic mode. Why would I care for myself? I don't have time to light a candle. Give me a break. That's stupid, right? My world's on fire. Why would I light another fire?
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the things that I want to notice, if we're in that zone, that's our red flag right there. If we're in the place where we're going, I do not have time for personal care. Red flag number one. That tells me we're feeling isolated already. And you are feeling the overwhelming weight of responsibility with the person you love for, that you care for, and you do need help. So when we talk about personal care, self-care, things like smelling a candle are great. Feeling good lotion, that's fantastic. But it doesn't change the fact that you feel alone and overwhelmed. So personal care when we're here looks like we have to reach out to get some people to help us hold the load we're carrying. If it's a child, there's a difference. If it's a child, they're still underage, we are legally responsible for them. We're going to have to get some people to help us while we are navigating the burden we are carrying for that child as we're stewarding their life as best we can while they're a minor. If we're talking about an adult child who is capable to have faculties that they can take steps themselves, we're not talking about like a legal dependence circumstance, or a spouse, a sibling, you name it, a parent even. Recognizing that this is an individual, this is a unique person, and they have a free will, and they are going to have to do their work, begin to take their steps. Self-care for the person who doesn't have the issue looks like I have to start letting them take some responsibility.
Wow.
And I have to find ways to find people to help me. I've got to find a place to offload some of this. Find a group, NAMI, the National Institute for Mental Illness, is a national program focusing on families that walk side by side with people with mental and emotional health differences. Groups help. We need to know we're not alone, and to build their resources to say, I don't even know where to start. Yeah. Is there an adult daycare if that's needed? When is the right time for someone to recognize their danger to themselves and they've got to get some really intense care to find something like that, or to help them find a therapist for that person, and the right balance that they're working with medication, you name it. Self-care begins with, I cannot be only fixed and focused on this person. I've lost me.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. A candle's not going to help right now. We need to have permission to go, I can't do this. I need somebody else to help me.
No, I really appreciate that. And just like you said, like the root is like loneliness, and everything's going to like kind of explode from there as far as like all the feelings, all the issues. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that would be kind of like the first, not even like you're fixing, and you're always going to go through, but just like that reaching out is kind of your first step. And even it's interesting to view that as personal care, because I feel like that's not necessarily socially, like, it's like, oh, it's personal care, like being alone, doing like your own, but like, no, like when you're in this situation, even I feel like it does apply to others, like personal care is like just not feeling like you're suffering alone. Like,
yeah.
Type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just to walk around Target.
Yes. That doesn't really fix that much. So, they make it seem way better than it is. You kind of hit on this a little bit, and I don't know if there's anything more to add, but like, you brought up like, there's like boundaries, almost it sounded like you need to set with someone, like, okay, like they need to like take care of themselves, not totally, but like they have things they need to do and I have things I need to do. What do you feel like are some just basic boundaries for someone to have a healthier relationship with their loved one who's struggling with a mental illness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And probably I would encourage people to lean into the article a little bit as well, as I was a little bit more specific on some things. This is also so nuanced for each person, depending on the diagnosis, depending on what level of care is needed. But recognizing your job is not to be your loved one's therapist.
Wow.
Or their doctor, or their emotional thermostat.
Wow.
That's got to be their own work. I can't be wrapped up in making sure they're okay all the time. Mm. It is actually really healthy for someone to be able to recognize their own responses. So things like recognizing, where do I end? And where do I begin? Am I always making it better for them? Am I always chasing after and trying to rescue them from what's hard?
Yeah. And
letting them actually experience some tension and face that they can find more people to also help them. They are not isolated either. And recognizing I can't be their whole world. And that's hard.
Yeah, that is really hard.
We find a lot of meaning in providing care for people. There's a flip side of that, something to work through with a therapist. What does that provide for you to be their caregiver all this time? So that would be an area that says, maybe I don't get you up every morning with your alarm because you refuse to pay attention to your alarm. Maybe I let you look at the consequences of when you're late to your job 5 days in a row. Maybe I don't pick up your car and do your taxes and do all these other things for you. Maybe I actually step back and allow you, and I'm clear with my own desires and my care for you, but maybe I let you do some of the things that I've been making sure to kind of catch you up around the edges all this time.
No, I think that's, I don't know, it really is even showing me like, you're not someone, like, you don't get to have to be their therapist. Like, there are other resources. And I think we can feel that way if we're with someone, like, well, like they won't go get help. So like, I'll be the help. And that's a huge burden to like carry, to be, like you said, like, I'm their whole world. Like, I don't think, I feel like that's how God designed. He wants people in relationship, but doesn't want that to be like one person is the whole world to this other person.
Yeah. So. Yeah. You can't be their savior. We already have one.
Yeah. No, it's true. So what final piece of advice would you give to someone who's watching this and maybe like kind of in the throes of this?
Mm-hmm. Don't ignore the loneliness.
Mm.
Don't ignore it. It can turn to bitterness and sometimes even feel like this is my cross to bear. I'm just the only one. I love your words earlier. God didn't make us to be alone. That wasn't his design. And there are people here who can help and who can support you as you walk through this with your family member and help you find the right balance for you in this season. It may not look like it for the rest of your lives. It may look different in different seasons. But the more you pay attention and recognize, hey, this is hard. I feel lonely. It helps kind of give you like a road sign on the side of the road, lane merging, pay attention, 500 feet. Helps kind of give you a little bit of direction to say, maybe I could reach out right here. What am I missing?
That makes sense. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like this was just so edifying, and even just, and I could totally feel like you have such a heart, not just for the person experiencing mental illness, but kind of like the whole package. Like we want everyone deserves to feel peace is kind of like what I got, and deserves to not feel alone, no matter what role they're playing. So I just really appreciate you taking the time to dive into that article topic and sharing it with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah. And thank you everyone who joined us to watch and listen. We love being able to give you resources, whether you are already a client of MCO or just curious about what we talk about when it comes to mental health. There is no topic that's off topic. And we really do care for everyone and want everyone to feel safe. Everyone deserves to feel that way. If you don't already follow our channels, you can find us on Facebook. If you search Love My Counselor. On Instagram, you can also search Love My Counselor and you'll find us there. On YouTube, if you search youtube.com/MyCounselor.Online Christian Counseling, you'll find our whole history of video interviews. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another session of My Counselor Online.